In a previous video, I spoke of refinement, and just a follow-up is that refinement is an endless process. You're never going to reach this endpoint to say, aha, I'm refined, or aha, my life is refined. It's never going to be like that. That being said, refinement is also not chasing perfectionism. It's not to become perfect. It's not to make your life perfect. The process of refinement is a joy in and of itself, that you just love refining. That refinement, it's the growth, it's the transformation process. And it's something that you devote your life to, that you fall in love with it. And it's endless, and you start living the paradox where the teacher is forever the student, the master is forever the disciple. The journey is the destination. That paradox, we are experiencing both simultaneously, is what you fall in love with. It's what you embody. It's what you live, where your life is the living refinement. And it's a reminder that you have to let go of that idea of arriving. You have to let go of your image of perfection to actually refine yourself. Because that right there actually is part of the process of refinement. Letting go of that image of perfection is actually part of the refinement. Letting go of how you think things should be or ought to be is part of that refinement. Mentioned this in other videos about refinement, how it's this process of removing things. Over time, you start seeing what's unnecessary. It's like an artist that continues to come back to its craft, or his or her craft. And you see that the process of refining something is not about adding more and more. In many ways, it's removing, and you start seeing how less is more. Every thing in your life serves a purpose. And this living refinement is about living intentionally, living consciously. So much so that your life is experienced as a living masterpiece. Not a living masterpiece in the sense that you have created something perfect, but you see that it's a living masterpiece because you're constantly refining. And it's a masterpiece because it feels like art. It's this living art because you're living from your heart, that it feels like a masterpiece. Something that you're always coming back to. Just a little iteration, a little tweak here, a little touch here. Remove this. Seeing if something can be more simple. This simplification is not about being minimal, but experiencing the potency in that simplicity. And you start feeling that potency in the most simple ways. And this refinement is something that's constantly revealing itself to you, in and as the life that you live and that you are. Like I said, it's just something that you fall in love with. You never reach this point where you say, aha, I'm done, or I've arrived, or this is it. And then experience some sort of stagnation. You're constantly growing, constantly evolving, and your life is constantly transforming. It's not like you created a painting and it then remains fixed or static. It's like that painting that's in your studio and you keep coming back to it every single day. Just a touch here, or rub that out, or restart. It's this constant renewal. It's a reminder to not be afraid of starting over. Because every time you start over, you're never starting over from scratch. You're always starting over from that wisdom that you've gained from the previous versions, iterations, creations, which is what makes the next version, the next creation so, what's the word here? Intentional, so exciting, because you get to implement what you've learned. You get to apply those lessons that you learned from the previous creation. And sometimes it's the less is more. Sometimes it's not using a certain material, sticking to the example of painting. Of course, I'm not a painter, so bear with me here. But you can see that sometimes it's changing those materials and wanting something that's more organic and raw. And you see this refinement in some of the best artists, that they switch materials. They want something that's more raw and natural and organic. And even their process is so raw and natural and organic that you see they get to this point where they almost throw out everything that they've learned. It appears to be like that. And this process of refinement, that then it's like they switch the mediums and the materials, and then it's so raw and organic and natural. And that's the aliveness that they're expressing. That only comes through the process of refinement. It's like before, they've learned all these techniques and ways and all this different stuff, and it's not to say that that has no merit or has no value. It definitely has value. Hello. It definitely has value, but it gets to the point where through that process of refinement, they have let go of that. It's served them already. But it gets to the point where it's sort of like they've outgrown it. That through that process of refinement, they've let go of those techniques. And they've refined themselves so much that they've come back to their essence through the art. The art has become the pathway for them to discover themselves and express themselves fully. And what they're actually expressing is that rawness, that naturalness, that which is organic. And that's why you see how they have what you can call, like, what you would call maybe an unorthodox style or technique, something so unique, so different. It's like, whoa, this guy's not even using paintbrushes anymore. He's grabbing twigs and sticks from nature and he's dipping them in paint and he's whipping it against the canvas, and then boom, it's making it so realistic, more realistic than you could create with a brush. And it's sort of like, that's so simple. Why didn't I think of that? Use the branch to create the painting of the tree. And it's things like that, or changing the medium, changing the creation. And it's in more of the direction of something like raw material. So these are just some examples of that process of refinement and how it gets expressed. It's always going to be expressed like that. You see, let me give you another example. Cooking is another one. Some of these restaurants, and you see it's like getting back to the roots and that refinement. Less is more, and they focus on, oh, here's another one with the less is more, quality over quantity, right? So it's more of the quality of the ingredients instead of the quantity of the ingredients. And they list right here, it's like, well, there's 4 ingredients and that's the dish, that's the meal. But it's like, why does it taste so good? How are these 4 ingredients tasting this good? And it's so simple. And it's, again, an expression of that simplicity, but focusing on that rawness and the quality, right? Because that's what they're expressing. They're expressing that rawness. They're expressing that quality, that aliveness that comes from the freshest ingredients, where there's no compromise. They're not settling for what is purchased at the grocery store. They're going right to the farm. So you see a lot of these kind of restaurants, not a lot, but some of these restaurants is like farm to table. And really there's an emphasis on that connection, right? Traceable food. You trace it from the table to the farm. And that's another example of that, right? These kind of old ways. They seem old. Some might call them ancient, but it's really getting back to our roots. And it's an expression where their job or their career or their, whatever you want to call it, vocation, that restaurant business, you know, that entrepreneur, the chef, the restaurant owner, when they're expressing themselves from that depth, from that truth, from their heart, then that business, that restaurant, the way that they cook, the way that that restaurant operates, what it emphasizes, what it expresses, what it represents, it is an expression of that refinement. It's the only way. Others might try and emulate it, copy it, replicate it, but it's not authentic because they haven't gone through that refinement. You come to that expression through the process of refinement. And if this message is resonating with you, it's because you're resonating with that refinement. So it's an invitation for you to continue refining yourself. And it's an invitation to join me in doing so. So I invite you to join me in truth.